Larry, we need your house. Not congratulations, not even a question. Just that statement dropped right in the middle of Sunday dinner, like it had already been decided. I'm Larry Reynolds, 61 years old, and I've heard plenty of ridiculous things in my 40 years managing people at the steel plant. But this one took the cake. I set my fork down slow and looked at my son Roger sitting across from my oak dining room table. Only then did Beverly, his wife of 2 years, add almost like an afterthought, "We're having a baby." The order of it hit me before I could even respond. House first, baby second. That told me everything I needed to know. I smiled because that's what you do first when someone says they're having a baby. "Congratulations," I said, keeping my voice steady. But my fingers tightened around my coffee mug. Beverly reached for Roger's arm, her expression careful, watching me more than celebrating. There was no excitement, no details spilling over, no nervous laughter about due, dates, or names, just waiting. Then Beverly leaned forward across my kitchen table, her manicured nails tapping against the wood surface. "Your place has the space we need," she said. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, that big fenced yard, quiet neighborhood, perfect for raising children. The way she said "we need" made it clear this conversation had already happened between them. Just not with me. I let the silence stretch a bit longer than they expected. Through the window behind Beverly, I could see my neighbor Jim washing his truck in his driveway. Normal Sunday afternoon stuff. Nothing like what was happening at my table. "And you think that's my problem?" I asked. The room went dead quiet. Roger looked down at his plate of pot roast and mashed potatoes. Beverly straightened up like she was stepping into a role she'd rehearsed for. "We're just trying to plan ahead for the baby, for stability," she said. I didn't lean back in my chair. I stayed where I was, one hand resting on the table, watching them both the way I used to when Roger was younger, and trying to explain why he'd come home past curfew. "What exactly are you asking?" I said. Another pause. Not confusion, calculation. Roger cleared his throat but didn't answer right away. Beverly glanced at him, then back at me, like she was measuring how direct she could afford to be. That's when I understood this wasn't an announcement at all. This was a negotiation they thought had already been won. Beverly adjusted her approach. She folded her hands like we were about to discuss something reasonable. "It's just that this place has more space than you really use," she said. 3 bedrooms when it's just you. The finished basement could be a playroom. That big backyard with the mature oak trees. Roger kept his eyes on the table, not correcting her, not softening what she was saying, just letting her speak for both of them. I watched that more than anything else. Not what she said, but what he didn't say. "This house would make things so much easier for us," Beverly continued, "especially with a baby coming. And you could downsize to something more manageable. Maybe one of those nice condos over on Maple Street." "Manageable," I repeated. "So, this is about convenience." Roger shifted in his seat. Beverly's expression tightened just a bit, then smoothed again. "It's about family," she replied. "Helping each other when it matters." I nodded once. Yes, helping. Not handing over what I worked 30 years to pay off. That's when Roger finally looked up. "Dad, we're not trying to take anything from you. We just thought maybe there's a way to make this work for everyone. For everyone." The phrasing was too careful. I could hear the space where the real sentence should have been. "This is your child," I said, not raising my voice. "Your responsibility." The words landed clean between us. Roger opened his mouth, then closed it. Beverly leaned back, reassessing. "You always said you'd help if we needed it," Roger said, quieter. "Now," I met his eyes. "I'll help you build something, but I won't hand you what I already built." Beverly tapped her fingers on the table, then stopped like she caught herself doing it. They weren't asking directly. They were trying to move the conversation somewhere I hadn't agreed to go. The afternoon light was starting to fade through my kitchen windows. This room had seen a lot of family discussions over the years. Helen and I had sat at this same table, planning Roger's college fund, discussing his first job, celebrating his graduation from trade school, real conversations about real plans built on honesty and hard work. This felt different. This felt like manipulation, wrapped in family obligation. "If you're not ready to handle this on your own," I said, keeping my voice level, "why have a child?" Roger flinched like the question hit harder than he expected. Beverly didn't react the same way. She didn't look hurt or surprised. She just watched me with that same composed expression, like she was recalculating rather than responding. That difference didn't escape me. "It's not like that," Roger said. "We just want to be prepared. Prepared by shifting the weight somewhere else? No, that's not what I mean." But he didn't finish the thought. I let the silence stretch, then spoke again. "I didn't force you to have a baby," I said. "That was your choice. So, now you find your way." Beverly's fingers tightened around the edge of the table, but her face stayed controlled. Roger leaned back in his chair, exhaling slow. "You're making this sound like we did something wrong," he said. "No, I'm saying you made a decision, and decisions come with responsibility." Beverly tilted her head, studying me. There was no excitement in her voice when she talked about the baby. No nervousness, no small details that people can't help sharing when something real is happening. Just strategy. Just pressure wrapped in careful words. That's when the thoughts settled clearly in my mind. This didn't feel like joy. It felt like leverage. They didn't come back the next week or the week after. Phone calls turned into short texts. When I asked how things were going, Roger answered with broad sentences that didn't say anything real. "We're figuring things out. Just busy. Everything's fine." Nothing about doctor appointments. Nothing about how Beverly was feeling. No due date, no talk about names, none of the small details people usually share without thinking. When Helen was pregnant with Roger 33 years ago, she couldn't stop talking about every little thing. The morning sickness, the weird cravings, what the doctor said at each visit. That's what real excitement looks like. This felt like radio silence. A month later, I ran into Roger outside Home Depot on a Saturday morning. He was loading drywall into his truck, probably for one of his electrical jobs. He looked surprised to see me, like he hadn't expected our paths to cross without warning. We talked about the weather, about work, about nothing important. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind. "How far along is she?" He hesitated, his hand still on the tailgate of his truck. "Early," he said. No number, no estimate, no excitement. Just early. "When's the due date?" "We're still figuring that out." That's not how pregnancy works. You don't figure out due dates. Doctors tell you due dates based on actual medical facts. Everything going okay with the doctor visits? Yeah, everything's fine. But he wouldn't meet my eyes when he said it. That night I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where they'd made their announcement. I replayed everything. The timing, the way Beverly had watched me instead of sharing details, the way Roger had followed her lead instead of speaking first. Even the order of the words, house first, then baby. It hadn't been excitement, it had been positioning. Helen's picture sat on the counter next to the coffee maker, the same spots, had occupied for the 4 years since she passed. She would have seen through this nonsense in about 10 seconds. Helen had a way of reading people that I'd always admired. She could tell when Roger was lying about homework when he was 8 years old, just by the way he shifted his weight. "What do you think, hun?" I said to the picture. "Something's not adding up here." I decided I needed to see the truth for myself. I didn't call before going over to their apartment complex the next Saturday afternoon. Pine Valley Apartments wasn't the worst place in town, but it wasn't great either. 2-story brick buildings from the 1980s with small parking lots and thin walls. Roger's truck was in space 47, so I knew he was home. I climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor and knocked on apartment 2, B. Roger opened the door after a few seconds, his expression shifting when he saw me. "Hey, Dad, what are you doing here? Just wanted to see how you two were doing. Is Beverly here?" "No, she's out. Shopping with her sister." I stepped inside without waiting to be invited. The place was small, maybe 800 square feet total. Living room, galley kitchen, one bedroom I could see down the short hallway. The furniture looked new but cheap, the kind you buy at those rent-to-own places when you want things to look nice but can't afford to pay up front. "Nice place," I said, looking around. The living room had a beige couch, glass coffee table, 55-inch TV mounted on the wall. Everything arranged to look bigger than it was. "Thanks, we're making it work." I sat down on the couch without being asked. Roger stayed standing, hands in his pockets. "So, how are things really going?" I asked, "with the baby and everything." "Good, really good." "Beverly feeling okay? No morning sickness? A little bit? Nothing too bad. That's good." "When's her next appointment?" Roger sat down in the chair across from me, but he looked uncomfortable. "Next week, I think. Which doctor is she seeing?" "Dr. Martinez. Over on Elm Street." "And how many weeks along is she exactly?" "About 8 weeks, maybe 9. "Maybe. Well, you know how it is early on. Things are still being figured out. No, I didn't know how it was. When Helen was pregnant, we knew exactly how far along she was from the first visit. We had pictures from the ultrasound. We had pamphlets about what to expect each week. We had a calendar marked with appointment dates. I looked around the apartment again. No pregnancy books on the coffee table. No vitamin bottles on the kitchen counter. No appointment cards stuck to the refrigerator. Nothing that suggested a baby was actually coming. "Roger," I said, not sitting back, "is there really a baby?" He froze. Not confused, not offended. Just completely still, like someone had pressed a pause button. The silence stretched between us, and in that space, I already knew the answer. Then he exhaled slowly, and his shoulders dropped. No. It wasn't said like a confession. It sounded like something giving. Way like a dam finally cracking under pressure. "We thought," he started, then stopped. His voice caught slightly before continuing. "We thought it would make things easier." "Easier to do what?" "To convince you. About the house." The words settled between us without any resistance. No denial, no attempt to reshape them. Just the truth, laid out too late to matter the way they'd hoped. "So, you lied to get my house." He didn't argue, didn't justify it, just sat there, looking past me like the truth made everything heavier than he could carry. "How bad is it?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "The money situation." Roger was quiet for a moment, then reached for the arm of his chair like he needed something solid to hold on to. "It's not that bad," he said. I waited. I'd learned a long time ago at the plant that silence gets you more honest answers than questions. "The rent's behind," he admitted finally. 2 months, and the credit cards are maxed out." "How many cards?" 4. "And the rest?" The rubbed his face with both hands before answering. "We bought furniture on credit, wanted the place to look right, and Beverly's car payment is $340 a month. Mine's $285. The pattern was clear. Not one mistake, but a series of them, each one making the next one seem reasonable. Buy now, pay later, keep up appearances, hope something works out. "Everyone we know is doing the same thing," Roger said, looking up at me. "Bigger apartments, nicer cars, better clothes. It's normal now. Normal doesn't make it sustainable. We were just trying to keep up." "With what?" He didn't answer right away, then quietly said, "Everything. The lifestyle, the image. Beverly's friends all have nice things. You're not struggling because life is hard," I said. "You're struggling because you're pretending it isn't." Roger's expression tightened. "That's not fair. It's accurate." The words came out the same way they had before, even and steady without force. He held my gaze for a second longer, then looked away. "So, what happens now?" he asked. "Now you figure out how to dig yourself out of this mess without dragging me into it." I stood up to leave, then turned back. "And Roger, don't ever lie to me again. About anything." That's when I made my decision, not out of anger, but out of clarity. If they wanted to play games with my property, I needed to protect myself legally. I went to see my attorney first thing Monday morning. Ed Patterson had handled my will when Helen died 4 years ago, and I trusted him. His office was downtown in one of those old brick buildings that had been renovated but still felt solid, permanent. "I need to protect my property," I told him, sitting across from his mahogany desk. "And I think I'm dealing with attempted fraud." Ed leaned back in his leather chair. He was about my age, gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of lawyer who'd been practicing family law for 30 years. "Tell me what's happening." I laid out the whole situation. The fake pregnancy announcement, the demand for my house, Roger and Beverly's financial mess, the lies about doctor appointments. "Here's what we can do," Ed said after I finished. "We set up a legal framework that looks like cooperation, but actually protects you. If they want the house transferred, they'll need to provide documentation." "What kind of documentation?" "Medical records, pregnancy verification from a licensed physician, doctor's contact information for verification, all the things that would be routine for a legitimate family property transfer involving expectant parents. And if they can't provide it, then we have grounds for fraud charges, attempted theft by deception. Given your property value, it's a serious felony. My house was worth $285,000. Helen and I had bought it in 1987 for $34,000, and we'd paid it off early by making extra payments whenever we could. 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, finished basement, big fenced yard with those mature oak trees Beverly had mentioned. The kind of place you work, your whole life to own free and clear. Ed drew up the papers over the next few days. A property transfer agreement that required medical verification of pregnancy with specific deadlines and fraud protection clauses. It looked generous on the surface, but it was actually a trap. Anyone with a real pregnancy could easily provide the documentation. Anyone lying about pregnancy would be caught. "This is elegant," Ed said, sliding the documents across his desk. "If they're telling the truth, no problem. If they're lying, they'll either have to confess or commit felony fraud in writing." I called Roger that evening. "I've been thinking about what you and Beverly said," I told him. "Maybe we can work something out." The relief in his voice was immediate. "Really? Dad, that's incredible. Beverly will be so excited. I'll need some things from you first." "Legal requirements, you understand?" "Of course. Whatever you need. Medical documentation of the pregnancy. For the property transfer to be legal, we need official verification from Beverly's doctor." "Oh, okay. How much detail?" "Standard stuff. Confirmation of pregnancy, estimated due date, doctor's contact information for verification. My attorney says it's routine for family property transfers involving expectant mothers." "Sure, we can get that." "Good. I'll need it within 2 weeks for the paperwork to go through properly." After I hung up, I drove to Best Buy and bought a basic security camera system. Nothing fancy, just a small wireless camera that recorded to my computer. If Beverly was going to lie to my face again, I wanted it documented. I set it up in my living room, angled to capture the main seating area where we'd have our conversations. The camera was small enough that most people wouldn't notice it unless they were looking for it. They came over the following Sunday, both of them looking more relaxed than I'd seen them in months. We sat in my living room, the same room where Helen and I had watched Roger take his first steps, where we had helped him with homework, where we'd celebrated his high school graduation. "Dad, this is really generous of you," Roger said, settling onto the couch. Beverly nodded, but she was watching me carefully. "Family helps family," I said. "But we do need that medical documentation Beverly promised to provide." Beverly shifted in her chair. "Of course. I just need to contact my doctor's office." "Great. Who's your doctor?" "Dr. Martinez, over on Elm Street." "And how far along are you exactly?" "About 8 weeks. When's your next appointment?" Beverly glanced at Roger. "Next Thursday." "Perfect. You can get the documentation then. My attorney needs it by Friday to process the transfer paperwork." "That should be fine," Beverly said, but something in her voice had changed, less confident, more careful. "And what's Dr. Martinez's full name? My attorney likes to have complete information." "Dr. Carlos Martinez, the one in the medical center on Elm Street?" "Yes, I knew there was no Dr. Carlos Martinez in the medical center on Elm Street. I'd driven by there after Roger mentioned the name, and I'd checked the directory. There was a Dr. Carmen Martinez who was a dermatologist, but no Carlos Martinez, and definitely no Carlos Martinez who delivered babies. But I didn't say anything. I just smiled and nodded and let Beverly dig herself deeper into a hole she didn't know she was creating. The deadline came and went. Then Beverly called with excuses. The doctor's office was behind on paperwork. They needed to reschedule the appointment. The records were being transferred to a new system. Each excuse bought them a few more days, but Ed and I had built the legal framework to be airtight. No documentation meant no house transfer. And the longer it went on, the stronger our fraud case became. Finally, 3 weeks past the deadline, I called Roger. "Son, we need to talk, all 3 of us, tonight." They came over at 7 p.m., and this time Beverly looked nervous. She kept checking her phone, adjusting her hair, fidgeting with her wedding ring. Roger looked tired, like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. We sat in my living room, the security camera capturing everything. The evening light was fading outside, casting long shadows through the windows. This room had seen a lot of family conversations over the years, but none quite like this one. "I'm going to ask you one more time," I said, looking directly at Beverly. "Are you pregnant?" She started to answer, but I held up my hand. "Before you say anything, you should know that attempted fraud for property transfer is a felony in this state. The documentation requirements aren't suggestions. They're legal necessities. And lying to facilitate fraud makes it worse, not better." Beverly's composure finally cracked. I don't understand why this has to be so complicated. It's complicated because you lied. Roger looked between us, confusion and dawning realization fighting across his face. Dad, what? Are you saying? I'm saying there is no baby. There never was. And your wife tried to use a fake pregnancy to steal my house. The silence in the room was complete. You could hear the old house settling, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant sound of traffic on Maple Street. Beverly's face went pale. Roger stared at her. Beverly? He said quietly. She didn't answer. The security camera has been recording our conversations, I said. I have documented evidence of the scheme, including Beverly's inability to provide medical verification after repeated requests and multiple deadline extensions. Roger turned to his wife, and I could see the moment when everything clicked into place for him. Tell me he's wrong. Beverly looked down at her hands. I thought if we could just get the house, we could make it work. We could figure out payments, or you could live here too, or something. By lying about a baby, people bend the rules all the time to get ahead. Everyone does it. No, I said, everyone doesn't. Roger stood up slowly, like he was carrying extra weight. I can't believe you did this. To me, to my father. We needed help. Then you ask for help. You don't lie about a pregnancy to steal someone's house. Beverly tried to salvage the situation. We can still make this work. We'll pay rent or work out a payment plan. I'll get a better job. The trust is broken, I said. It can't be fixed with payment plans. Roger walked to the window, looking out at the yard where he used to play as a kid. Helen and I had pushed him on the swing set that used to sit under the big oak tree. We'd taught him to ride a bike on the sidewalk out front. This house held 33 years of his life, and his wife had tried to steal it with a lie. What happens now? Roger asked, not turning around. Now you both leave, I said, and you figure out your life without involving my property. Are you going to press charges? Beverly asked, her voice small. I looked at her for a long moment. That depends on whether you try anything like this again. Ed filed the fraud charges the next week anyway. Sometimes consequences need to be official to mean anything. Beverly pled down to a misdemeanor and got 100 hours of community service, but the damage was done. Roger filed for divorce 2 months later. The paperwork was finalized by Christmas. Roger moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Nothing fancy, but something he could afford on his electrician's salary. He started tracking his spending, paying down the credit card debt piece by piece. No shortcuts, no looking for someone else to solve the problem. When he talked about it, he didn't frame it as progress. He just stated it plainly, like something that had to be done whether he felt ready or not. We didn't talk much during the divorce proceedings, but he started coming by again afterward. First just to borrow tools, then to help with small repairs around the house, then just to sit and talk. I'm sorry, he said one Saturday afternoon, as we replaced a broken board on the back deck. For all of it. You got caught up in something that seemed easier than it was. I should have known better. Now you do. I made my own adjustments, too. I updated my will to put the house in a trust with clear conditions. If Roger was ever going to inherit it, it would be through structure and time, not expectation or manipulation. I also changed all the emergency contacts and financial permissions that still had his name on them. It wasn't punishment. It was clarity about boundaries and independence. One evening in spring, 6 months after the whole mess started, Roger came by after work. We sat on the back porch, watching the sunset filter through the oak trees, the same trees Beverly had mentioned in her pitch for the house. You know what I learned? Roger said. What's that? That wanting something doesn't mean you deserve it, and deserving something doesn't mean someone else should. Hand it to you. I nodded. Your mother would have been proud to hear you say that. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, father and son, both of us older and maybe a little wiser than we'd been a year before. This house had never been a solution to anyone else's problems. It was the result of 40 years of honest work, decisions made carefully, progress built without shortcuts. Helen and I had bought it in 1987 for $34,000, and we'd paid it off early by making extra payments whenever we could. Every room held memories of the life we'd built together. The kitchen where she'd taught Roger to make pancakes, the living room where we'd watched him graduate high school, the bedroom where I'd held her hand during those last difficult months. Beverly had seen it as an asset to acquire, but it was never just an asset. It was the foundation of everything we'd worked for, everything Helen and I had built together. Now it stood exactly as it should, protected, preserved, and ready to be. Passed on when the time was right and the person was ready to earn it. That's how it should be. That's how Helen would have wanted it. And that's how it's going to stay. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's worst decisions, even when they call it family loyalty. A house built with honest work will always be worth more than one acquired through lies, because integrity can't be mortgaged or stolen.